Hi, everyone. Welcome officially. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is you're tuning in from. My name is Hala Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am pleased to welcome you to today's live author reading of new thrillers. We'll be hearing from John W. Long, reading from In the Name of the Father, released on July 9th, and Dawn Hemmings, reading from My Dark Secret, released July 23rd. Both authors' books can be purchased from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, the books can be ordered on Atmosphere Press's website. That's at atmospherepress.com/books. I'm also going to put some links in the chat for you too, so you can check those out. At the end of today's event, we are going to have time for audience questions. So during the readings, if you have a question for one or both of our authors, go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. Then you can also stay muted for the duration of the event, but feel free to use the chat for any praise and comments in addition to questions. One last note before we get into it is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting John and Dawn today. We're going to start off with our first reader, who is John W. Long. John is a retired federal agent, and during his 36-year law enforcement career, he has been a military intelligence officer, a homicide detective, and the special agent in charge of the Atlanta region for DOT Inspector General. In 2020, he was nominated for Author of the Year in the Mystery category by the Georgia Independent Authors Association for his first novel, Red Blood on White Cotton. He lives in Cumming, Georgia, with his wife, Joellen, and Havanese pup, Bailey, which I can say I have a Havanese pup in my family too, and they are so sweet. So I love to hear that. Today, though, we will be hearing from In the Name of the Father. In the tropical paradise of Fort Lauderdale, a mysterious killer is stalking infamous residents, exposing their dark secrets and exacting revenge for past misdeeds. Homicide detective Jack Johnson is tasked with finding the sadistic killer, taking us from sandy beaches to dangerous Everglades and the city's dark underbelly. John, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Chapter 1, Juliana Rosenfeld. The watcher gazed at her fluid movements as she left the gym. She glided to her little car, the baby blue BMW convertible. Unlocking it and placing the gym bag in the rear seat, she scooted into the front and squeezed her long legs beneath the wheel. Her workout was vigorous every day, at least an hour, sometimes two. Tiny beads of perspiration dotted her face and shoulders. Toned and tanned, she was stunning. 5'10", not much over 100 pounds. The scorching Florida sun highlighted her blonde hair and dazzling smile. Of course, she had implants, teeth and bust. He had sidled up close to her at the mall in Coral Springs. He had almost touched her. She wore Gucci Flora. Her smell fresh and cool, like standing under a waterfall. He put his binoculars back in their case, watched a green lizard chasing his mate up a vine clinging to the wall beneath the ginkgo tree. There was no need to follow her. He knew her routine. She would go to Starbucks on Las Olas, purchase a mocha, and sit outside sipping it, scrolling through her phone or reading a paperback. She would return to her condo on the Intercoastal off Banyan Place sometime for tanning and pool time. Occasionally, she had lunch with a girlfriend or had her nails or hair done, but usually she went straight home. He had followed her. She had followed this leisurely routine for the past month, only deviating a few times when she entertained a special guest at 10 a.m. She greeted him as though he was an old friend and invited him inside. He stayed almost until noon. On the way out, she had kissed his cheek and patted his shoulder. He left with a spring in his step. The remainder of her day would consist of lounging by the pool, reading, napping, or an occasional shopping spree. Most nights, as the sun started to descend into the Everglades, she would be ready to go out. Occasionally, she would venture to the casino or maybe to a party on a yacht. The phone would ring and she would have a date. No pimp for this girl. She had graduated to the big time. She was only playing with big boys, and Fort Lauderdale was full of big boys. Athletes, drug smugglers, con men, professional gambling, and a few mobsters for good measure. She had made scores of contacts, and she didn't need to use her website anymore. The watcher observed the little blue car exit the parking lot. It pulled up to a two-way stop at Las Olas. The time was near. He could feel it. It made his skin tingle. She had seemed like a good candidate, but he wanted to be sure. This would be his first, and he had to make sure everything was right. Normally, a high priced hooker would not have interested him. It was a crime few people cared about. He certainly didn't care about it. It was a victimless crime, they called it. Fort Lauderdale was full of hookers, but pretty Juliana was special. She had a secret. She had committed a far worse crime, a deadly sin, and he knew about it. Now he just needed to decide how and when she must pay. Chapter 3. Jack Johnson. Pounding, incessant pounding. Jack Johnson slowly opened his eyes. It had to be the middle of the night, but he saw sunlight streaming through the open curtains. An ocean breeze ruffled the curtains and blew papers off his nightstand. He could smell the salty air and hear the seagulls screeching out over the beach. Palm fronds rustled like rattling bones in the sable palm outside his window. Surely he had only slept a few minutes. He raised up on one elbow, wiped the sleep from his eyes, and heard more pounding. What the hell was that pounding? And then he remembered. A marine contractor was building a new dock across from a condo on the intercoastal. They must be driving the pilings today. He swung his legs off the bed, leaned over, rubbed his temples, and then he realized the pounding was not from outside, it was from inside his head. It was pounding as if it would soon explode. He pulled himself up, struggled to the bathroom, rifled a drawer for a bottle of Advil, grabbed four and downed them with a half glass of water. His body felt as though he'd been run over by a Mack truck. A stranger stared back at him from the mirror. He barely recognized himself, an unshaven wreck. He returned to bed. It was too early to get up. He flopped down. Why was his head pounding so? And then he remembered it might have something to do with the beefeater martinis he had downed the night before at the Bahia Mar Tiki Bar. He called them martinis, but they weren't martinis. They were just iced glasses of gin with a couple of olives thrown in. He had told Tina, the bartender, to open a bottle of Martini and Rossi vermouth and just place it next to his glass. The fumes wafting over the glass would be enough vermouth for the way he liked them. He had roared with laughter, but she had a scowl. As a regular, she tried to please him, but she also knew he was an alcoholic, and she knew when to cut him off. Last night, that sixth martini was the point. Otherwise, he would have probably still been there. He had joked with Tina, "I'm not an alcoholic. I don't go to those damn meetings." He had laughed, but she had not. An uncomfortable silence had crept into the bar. He gazed into his glass and whispered to himself, "No, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm just a damn drunk." A tear rolled down his cheek. He dabbed at it quickly so Tina wouldn't see. Jack had shed a lot of tears in the past 2 months since his wife of 10 years had walked out on him. Allie had warned him a dozen times. Then finally she was serious. He'd come home from work and everything belonging to her was in the condo was gone. Her closet was empty, not a stitch left. All her shoes were gone. Everything from her bathroom, her makeup, hair stuff, jewelry, perfume, everything was gone. Her scent still filled the place. Perfume wafted through the bathroom and the bedroom. He had been devastated that night, sitting on the floor in their bedroom sobbing. She had finally done it. He had threatened before, but now she had finally done it. The love of his life was gone. Resorting to the only thing he knew to do when confronted by a problem like this, he'd gone to the liquor cabinet and pulled down a bottle of Jack Daniels. He walked out to his dock overlooking the intercoastal. Stiff breeze blew in from the ocean only a few blocks away. He drank it in gulps until the bottom was empty, and then he stumbled inside and fell into bed, an empty bed. Allie was gone this time, and she was not coming back. Jack had been a zombie for the next few days as he went back to work and tried to do his job, that being a homicide detective for the Broward County Sheriff's Office. It was a job he had done for the past 8 years, and he had done it very well and had gained a lot of respect from his supervisors and his peers. He was homicide's golden boy. He had almost a perfect closure rate, perfect except for one floater with a bullet in his skull that they had never identified. The guy had been in the water so long his flesh had come off his fingers, so no prints were obtainable. The circulated dental records had proved useless. This was the only blemish on his perfect record in 8 years. Every other homicide assigned to him had been solved. He investigated his cases relentlessly, living every one of them. Each case was a personal challenge, and he worked like a madman to solve it. But his work ethic and his relentless efforts had come at a price. He had started to drink to ease the pain of human suffering he saw every day. At first, it had been a few beers with the guys after his shift, and then he moved to hard liquor. Allie had warned him about his drinking. She had begged him to no avail. It was something he could not do without. He needed it, like an addict needed their dope. But now he needed Allie more, and he was miserable. She had taken a leave of absence for her job as a nurse and had gone to stay with her sister in Jupiter. He'd called her a dozen times, but she refused to take his calls. He drove up to Jupiter to see her, but she had refused to see him. After a few weeks, she agreed to talk to him, but he had been drunk at the time he was on the phone, slurring his words and crying. She said she needed more time to sort things out. Maybe they could get together and talk. But that had been 2 months ago, and she still wasn't ready to talk. And his drinking was not getting any better, it was getting worse. He'd started to drink on the job. He kept a flask in his car and took a shot or two every chance he got. He kept breath mints and mouthwash in his desk and car. So far, his boss didn't know anything about it. He was good at hiding it. He moaned. It was too early to get up. He fell back to sleep and dreamed of being out on his boat with Allie. Allie was laughing, her tan skin gleaming in the hot sun, tossing her hair back the way she did, looking up at the azure sky. She'd never been more beautiful. He reached out to caress her face. He kissed her gently. Then he pulled her to him to kiss her hardly on the lips. She pulled away, and then she floated over the gunwales of the boat. She drifted into the air. Stark white cumulus clouds covered her. And then Jack woke when his cell phone rang. That completes my reading.
Thank you so much, John. You really kind of um, threw us into this world, and I really like how kind of immersive that felt. And your reading voice is perfect for it. So yeah, thank you so much for that reading.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Our next reader for today is Dawn Hemmings. Dawn is a true wanderer, whether she's traveling around the world or driving through the beautiful roads of the UK in her camper van named Frida. Dawn grew up in North Lincolnshire and lives with her two Maine Coons, Banjo and Presley. So jealous, I wish I had a Maine Coon cat. Dawn has been working in health and safety for more than 27 years. She's achieved academic success with an MSc in Environmental Health and Safety and an MBA. Dawn has also been a hairdresser and a skilled personal assistant. In her books, she weaves stories inspired by her diverse travels and her fascination with mysteries and murder. In My Dark Secret, Isla, a seemingly ordinary librarian, harbors a secret fascination with true crime and the complexities of the criminal mind. As her academic interest deepens, a sinister seed takes root, leading her down a chilling path of obsession. The line between researcher and practitioner blurs as she contemplates the unthinkable and meticulously plans a terrible act. We'll hear more now from Dawn herself.
Thank you. And right on cue, one of the Maine Coons has just come in. Okay, so step 5, the art of death. As I pushed the Hoover around the living room, I found myself wrestling with the idea that deciding to end someone's life is an incredible heavy burden to bear. It's not a choice to be taken lightly. It's a decision that carries immense moral and ethical weight. The weightiness of this choice is not lost on me, and it lingers heavily in my thoughts. I'm acutely aware of the profound moral and ethical concerns surrounding such a grave act. It's a decision that goes against my values and the societal norms I've grown with. The very notion of causing harm and suffering to another human being troubles me deeply. This ethical dilemma is causing a great deal of inner turmoil within me. I'm constantly grappling with the idea of inflicting pain on someone else and the potential devastation it could bring to the victim's family and friends. The gravity of this decision weighs heavily on my heart and mind, prompting me to reflect deeply on the moral implications of my thoughts and actions. I'm abruptly pulled back to the present when the vacuum cleaner ground to a halt. Once again, it was Apollo's shedding fur clogging the roller. I made my way to the bin to clear it out before returning to the task at hand, allowing my mind to wander once more. However, there's a particular division within me. While I recognize the gravity of this decision and the profound noble concerns it raises, it doesn't trouble me enough to extent that I, like most people, could never commit such an act. It's as if I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, gazing into the abyss of my own thoughts, torn between the true repulsion of the act and the dark curiosity that continues to beckon me forward. This internal conflict is a source of discomfort, yet it persists, gnawing at the edges of my consciousness, driving me to explore the darkest corners of my psyche. I shook off those moral considerations and focused on the task at hand, deciding how to proceed. As I opened my laptop, Apollo hopped onto the table and nestled beside me. It was as though he had an innate sense of activities, always eager to be part of the moment, even if it meant simply lying next to me. I started searching, and it soon became apparent that there are countless methods to kill someone, each one chilling than the last, and I was on a quest to select the most fitting one for John. My determination led me back and forth to my trusted books and the endless webs of information. There I entered an extensive journey through the chronicles of criminal history, scrutinizing the stories of infamous killers. I had been compiling a journal that held within its pages a chilling array of methods for extinguishing a life. As I delved deeper into my research, I uncovered vast reservoirs of sinister possibilities. The journal became a chilling catalogue featuring gruesome acts such as stabbing and suffocation, alongside the more discreet approach of drug overdose. But my search didn't stop at conventional sources. It extended into the realms of unconventional inspiration. It was during one of my search binges that I stumbled upon the horrific scene of the television series Peaky Blinders. In that grim narrative, I discovered a particular haunting sequence, which a victim was subject to a nightmarish ordeal. It involved the chilling process of digging a grave, executing the unfortunate soul, setting the remains ablaze, and finally burying them. It was a stark reminder of how the human imagination could conjure up the most gruesome scenarios. In the depths of my gruesome research, I unearthed a chilling array of methods to extinguish a life: strangulation, stabbing, the cold precision of a gunshot, the silent despair of drowning, the deceitful ease of poison. Each method whispered its dark allure, beckoned me to choose. I sought not just a means to kill, but the right one, a method that would let me savor the act, yet slip away unseen, untouched by the law. It was a labyrinth decision, each path fraught with sinister implications, a veritable minefield in the art of death. I knew that choosing the right method was crucial, not just for John, but also for my own sake. It had to be something that would ensure my escape from the clutches of justice, leaving no trace behind. Moreover, the method I selected would determine whether I needed a single dumping location or multiple ones scattered across the city. This decision hinged on the specifics of the chosen method. After countless hours of contemplation and drowning in research, I reached a conclusion that would seal John's fate. My foremost concern was ensuring that John's passing would be painless, devoid of any struggle. He had endured immense struggling in his life, and I was adamant that his death wouldn't add to that anguish. So after a thorough process of elimination, I settled on a method that would involve drugging John by administering a substantial dose of sleeping pills and then proceeding to dismember his body, followed by placing each body part into a bag to make disposal easier. Why choose dismemberment, I hear you say? I chose it as the method for my sinister plan because it offers a unique advantage that sets apart from the typical messiness associated with killers, especially male ones. You see, most killers tend to hasty and recklessness leave a gruesome trail of evidence behind. They let their emotions guide their actions, resulting in chaotic crime scenes that particularly scream, "I was here." My approach will be entirely different. I spent countless hours studying the particular details of notorious killers and their mistakes. Dismemberment, when done correctly, can be a precise and controlled process. It allows me to disassemble a body methodically, minimizing the risk of leaving behind incriminating evidence. I'm not driven by impulsive emotions. Instead, I'm coldly calculating, focused on invading, capture, and leaving no trace. This is what sets me apart and ensures my plan will unfold differently from those reckless killers I've studied. Plus, I'm only 5'5" and I'm not strong enough to haul about a grown man's body. Armed with a more morbid purpose, I set off on a chilling task to ascertain how many parts a human body could be segmented into. Before me lay an anatomical illustration, its human form now a daunting jigsaw. With each division, I plotted the image transformed, morphing into a grisly blueprint for a dark deeds. Methodically, I constructed the human anatomy into pieces, crafting a ghastly guide for what was to come. 17 different parts. The gruesome list unfolded. 1 head, 2 upper arms, 2 forearms, 2 hands, 2 thighs, 2 calves, 2 feet, 1 spine, 1 pelvis, 1 rib cage, and a singular morsel collection of internal organs. Each segment was integral to the despicable scheme I was weaving. The precise disposal of each was crucial, a key to keeping my anonymous plot shrouded in secrecy. Knowing the numbers of parts, my mind turned to the next phase, determining the locations for their disposal, each site a silent accomplice to my shadowy endeavour. In the shadow corners of my mind, I knew full well that dismembering a human body was no mere task. It was a harrowing journey into the heart of darkness. Even the most notorious killers, those who had tread this ghastly path before, confessed to the daunting nature of such a horrific deed. This was no simple feat. It was an endeavour that would strain the sinews of my soul, a twisted trial of both physical and mental endurance. In the eerie silence of my thoughts, I often find myself thinking of Dexter, that fictional harbinger of death who found a grotesque satisfaction in his ritual of dismemberment, reveling in the crimson splatter and the grotesque tapestry of severed limbs. Having made his grim decision, the comparatively straightforward planning phase was now behind me. I turned my focus to readying my body for the grueling task ahead. My visits to the gym, once routine, are transformed into a relentless pursuit of physical prowess. The clank and grind of weights became my symphony, each repetition a step closer to the monstrous strength I would need. I understood with chilling clarity that this newfound physical figure was not just for show, it was a necessary evolution for the dark, laborious task that awaited. As I pieced together the sinister puzzle, each element of my plan was painstakingly addressed, laying a foundation steeped in dread. Now it was time to select the final pieces of this morbid mosaic and disposal sites. These were not just locations, they were the silent guardians of my secret, the final act in the play written in shadows. Each site had to be chosen with care, a crucial cog in the intricate machinery of my ghastly plot. In this game of cat and mouse, where every detail mattered, these hidden graveyards were the key to ensuring that my dark narrative remained untold, whispered only in the hushed tones of the night. That concludes my reading.
Thank you so much, Dawn. I think we can feel where that title comes from, from that reading. So
Definitely.
yeah, thank you so much for throwing us in there and having us feel it alongside the characters.
You're welcome.
Of course. So at this time, we do have time for our audience Q&A. So if you have a question, please go ahead and type that in the chat and I'll make sure it gets asked. We already have a question for both authors. This one is, how do you approach the task of writing a compelling thriller? I think compelling is probably the operative word there, but maybe we could go in reading order. So John, do you want to start us off with this one?
Sure. How do you write a compelling novel? How do you go about it? Well, I had 36 years experience in law enforcement, and for the last probably 10 or 15, I always thought about writing some of the cases that I had investigated. And I started making notes. And then a few years ago, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, I started making outline and determined that I was going to write a novel recounting some of those homicide cases. Making it compelling and making it putting hooks into it that I thought would capture the reader was the hardest part. I rewrote and rewrote and read and had my wife, my editor, read, and we rewrote. And it was a very hard project. It took us about 3 or 4 years to get it to where, we were happy with it. So I would say the hardest part about it is just knowing what you want to write and then being able to write it and, to make it compelling, to make it where you read it and feel like others would be interested in reading it. That it would be a thriller for them.
Yeah, I love this idea of getting this outside input from people because it's so valuable when you want to make sure you're actually striking the tone that you're going for. So, Dawn, what about you? How do you kind of go about writing a thriller in this compelling way?
So for me, I wanted to write a book for quite a number of years, and I guess part of this book is autobiography, because it is my fascination as to why people kill. Don't worry, I haven't killed anybody. But it was, I wanted to write something, and it started off me driving round a roundabout and thinking, I'm sure you can hide a body in there, because it was just full of trees, this roundabout. So it was originally going to be called the Roundabout Murders, but then as I started doing the research, and I actually did qualifications myself to try and get inside the head of a killer. So I did forensic science diploma, and I did criminology and criminal psychology, because I wanted to write it as a first person. So the whole book is inside Isla's head. It's her story, her thinking, and I wanted people to, like, as she's thinking, get pictures in the head of actually what she's thinking. And I also watched a film once, and I thought about the sound effects, and I thought, how can you build the sound effects from a film into a book so that as people are reading it, they're creating the movie in the head with the sounds and the visions. And so I did 5 years of research, and I watched so much murder, from films to real life interviews with serial killers, reading books, even watching CSI on TV, and all that kind of stuff. And I've got a notebook just full of notes and quotes, and that kind of inspired me to kind of write the book in the way it is. And I think the other thing that's quite unique about it is that there is no detective in it. It is just the first voice of Isla and what she wants to do and how she wants to, kill somebody and the plan that she puts in place. So I think the fact there is no detective in it makes it quite unique. And I think, being inside someone's head can be quite scary. So I think that makes it a little bit more compelling to read as well.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated to hear about this research process because especially recently that's such a widespread interest. I think a lot of people are really fascinated by the type of research that can be. So I'm just so interested to hear about that. But now we have another question for both authors. This is from Susan. Is there a particular author whose style inspires you? Maybe we can go reverse order this time. So starting off with you, Dawn.
Um, I've been asked this question before. I mean, I read a lot of Patricia Cornwell and Kathy Reich, but I don't think my style of writing kind of fits in with theirs. Um, but they are very inspiring. Again, women authors as well. Um, I would like to say something like Stephen King because I think that's kind of where my books kind of sits, but I can't even bring myself to read half his books, so probably not him. But yeah, I guess Kathy Reich and Patricia Cornwell.
Really great influences. I feel the same way about Stephen King, so relating to that. John, what about you? Any authors that you are particularly inspired by with their style?
So I'd have to say Harlan Coben and David Baldacci are two of my favorites. I've read everything that either of them have written, and I've always aspired to be able to write like they both write. And the thing I like about them is they have so many different hooks and plot twists that just keep you hooked. It's hard to put down. And when I was writing, I always tried to think, how do I do that? How do I possibly keep the reader engaged like they keep me engaged? So I guess those are two of my favorites.
Another great set of inspirations. I'm excited to hear all this and kind of resonating with it. We've got another question again for both authors. Are any of your characters based on real people you know? And if so, is that kind of a sensitive decision in a book with this darker subject matter? John, any characters based on real people you know?
Yes. The protagonist in my book, the psychopathic killer, uh, even though um, there were some plot twists and turns to protect the names of the person I handled. When I was a homicide detective, I was always fascinated by psychopaths. I was always fascinated in interviewing them, how they could talk to you about all of the dastardly things they did and the brutal way they had murdered people. They would be talking to you like they were carrying on a casual conversation. And one in particular that I worked back in the 80s, the particular brutal killer, I based the character in the name of the father somewhat on him. Just some of the methods he killed, like he killed by pouring acid down people's throats, and he liked to stick people in the neck and watch them bleed. So I borrowed some of that from him, and it's my main character is partially based on him.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine how that kind of translates from those, I mean, of all things, real life experiences to, creating this compelling sort of villainous work. Dawn, what about you? Any characters based on real people you know?
Probably me. It is most of it is probably me. Um, Obviously I haven't taken it, like I said, I haven't taken it to the point where Isla has. But I think that fascination and what does it feel like to actually kill somebody? fascination comes from me. So yeah, it is me.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of alluded to that earlier, so I'm not necessarily surprised, but I definitely have that feeling where I introduce so much of my own self into characters, so I can feel how that happens. This is a question now for John. It seems like your real life work was very difficult, or career was very difficult. Do you find writing books like this to be cathartic in a way?
I do. I really do. Like I mentioned earlier, I um, was always really, really busy. I mean, working, working, working. I never had time to write and I always wanted to write. And when I went to college, I had planned to be a writer. And of course, life happens and things change. But since I've retired and I have the time to write, I do find it relaxing and I do find it very fulfilling to be able to finally uh, publish books telling the stories that I've always wanted to tell. So yeah, it has been. I might add one other thing. Um, the character, you didn't find out too much about Jack Johnson from my reading, but my main character, Detective Jack Johnson with Broward County Sheriff's Office, is kind of patterned on me. After I had been working homicide for about 8 years, uh, I started developing a problem with alcohol. And I don't, it wasn't as bad as Jack Johnson's. I didn't get divorced or anything, but I recognized it. And I think it was partially because of all of the human suffering you see and all of the things that you're dealing with on a daily basis. And finally, it just gets to you and you need some way to relieve that. And I think I developed a problem with alcohol during that time. Fortunately, I didn't let it get too bad, and I was able to overcome it. But I made it a big part of this novel because I wanted to point out that it happens to a lot of homicide detectives, a lot of police personnel that are dealing with stress all the time. And finally, I think a lot of them turned to alcohol as a way of dealing with it.
Well, I'm happy to hear that at least with the writing side of things, it's kind of a more cathartic, perhaps healthier coping mechanism in that way. So I know for a lot of writers, having the experience of writing and putting things to text can be just so almost therapeutic in a way. So yeah, I think that's a good thing to hear. We have one more question. This is for both authors. Do either of you plan to write another novel? And if so, would that one also be a thriller? Dawn, are you, or tell us about your future writing plans?
So this is one of three. So it's a trilogy. So I was in Peru in April doing the Inca Trail, and I actually drafted the outline for book two for the next what Isla gets up to next. So there will be three. And I'm also doing a non-fiction book about my granddad, who was a prisoner of war in Italy. And I have all his letters that he sent my nana from the prisoner of war camp, which are quite funny. So I'm going to write how he ended up being captured and the letters and the stories that he wrote, he told us as children. So I think from a non-fiction kind of book, I think it'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, I would be really fascinated to hear that. I think that's definitely something I haven't heard much about. So I would love to see how that pans out for sure. John, what about you? Future writing plans?
I am planning to write another thriller. At the moment, I'm writing a Christian book, and I'm just about finished with it. It's going to be published this fall. And as soon as I finish that, I'm going to go back and I am going to write another thriller because when I was writing In the Name of the Father, I was trying to choose which murders, which homicides I would profile in the book. And I thought I was pulling in my old notes and looking at old photographs and pulling murder books that I have in my basement in storage and going through them. I decided that there's two or three other really good stories in there involving some very unique murders that I'd like to write about. So Soon after the first of the year, I'm going to start that new thriller.
All right, so future writing plans from both of you that I think a lot of people are going to be excited to see. But at this point, I just want to say thank you so much to both of you for joining us today, for sharing your books with us, um, for sharing some behind the scenes and the process leading up to these books releases. So to John and Dawn for being generous with us today. And thank you, of course, to everyone in the audience for joining us as well and helping us celebrate these wonderful authors. Don't forget for everyone that you can order In the Name of the Father and My Dark Secret from the links in the chat. I'm just going to put those in there one more time so you can check those out. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and just let us know that you attended today's event. So we'll look forward to hearing from you, but other than that, that's it for today. So have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much.